Hi there, we're in the middle of the exhibition today, but I've just sold this little painting that you can see behind me, this one down here. See if I can angle the camera onto it. It's called Hideaway Homestead, and I just noticed that the painting hasn't been varnished yet, so I'm going to varnish it for the client, which is part of our service that we do here. And I just thought you might like to see how I go about doing the varnishing of an acrylic painting. So I'll just show you the materials that I use first of all. One of my favourite ones is the Chroma Gloss Solvent Varnish. This one's a satin one. There's satin, invisible and gloss, but my preference is the gloss. So I haven't got a bottle of that, but I've also got this other one, which is a really nice final varnish, the gloss. I don't know if you can see that, it might be reversing the text, I'm not sure, but it's the Derivan Matisse medium number 14, and it's called Final Varnish Gloss Finish. I always like the gloss finish because it really brings the colour out a lot better than satin or invisible, which is like matte. If you find some varnishes that have got matte written on them. There's a few other brands you can get. There's a Winsor & Newton one as well. Winsor & Newton tends to be quite expensive, but it's kind of the best that you can buy. The first thing that I do is I put some little chocks out to get the painting up off the level of the table. I'm just going to see if I can switch the camera around. Yes, I can. That's good. So I've got my tarp spread out here on a table in the middle of the exhibition. I've got these little wooden chocks that I use to just stand up. They all need to be about roughly the same height, and I put them under the four corners of the painting so that the painting sits up above the tarp. And I'm just going to grab the artwork here and pop it onto these little legs. So it's on these four little wooden legs that sit it up higher. If I put them just inside, then I'll be able to varnish right around the edges, because this painting's actually got paint all the way around the edges of it. So put it to the side there, get my stuff out of the way. I like to use a large hog bristle brush to do a painting of this size, or a smaller one. You know, you can get the little 1-inch brushes in hog bristle, that they're quite good for doing varnishing as well. But I'm going to use the Derivan Matisse one today, so I just need to get my can opener into it. I hope I can do this one-handed holding the phone. That's a bit tricky. Let me just see if I can demi it up and hang onto the phone without dropping it while I do this. So I've got that out. It's nice and clear varnish in the can. I wonder if my brush is going to fit into here. Sometimes the brush doesn't quite fit into the can, but I think I'll be all right on this at this time. And so I'm just going to set this up to the side. So I've got my can over here out of the way a little bit. And so I make sure that there's no dust on the canvas. Make sure there's no insects or anything else that's been sitting on display for a while. There's often a little bit of dust on the top edge of the painting, so try and clean all of that off so that there's no dust that will mingle in with the varnish. And then it's just a matter of if I'm using one of these jars of varnish, it's really cool because you can just take off the bottle and then just pour the liquid into the middle of the canvas. So I really like doing that. The pouring method is great. With this can, I can't quite do that. So what I'm going to do is load up the brush tons. See if I can do this without dripping varnish all over the tabletop. Just load up heaps and then plonk it into the middle of the canvas. So it's the same sort of thing as pouring a big blob of the varnish into the middle of the canvas out of a jar. So that's the one reason why the jars are really good. You can just plop a whole pile of varnish on the canvas. So you can't really see from straight up above, but the best way to check how you're going with your varnishing is to, if you've got a window up across the way, you get your eye level right down to the level of the varnish, then you can see exactly what is going on the surface of the painting. So now you can see that there's a bit of a puddle there in the middle. So what I do is I try and push this puddle around. First of all, this puddle that I've got in the middle, I like to push it to all the corners first, It's kind of like drawing a big X shape. You can see when the varnish goes on, the colours just come out so beautifully. I just love varnishing. Anyone who's seen me varnish before, you know I just go a bit nutso about this process. I'm going to need a little bit more on there because it's quite a large canvas. I'll just really load up this brush and then throw it on. And so I've got drawn an X across to the corners, and then sometimes it's just a matter of spreading it in between because we've really got it spread right out to the far distant corners. Can you see how the colour comes out so rich where the brush strokes are? So this little patch here, if I varnish over the top there, the colours just come out so beautifully. So what you want to do is pour and then spread, and you never ever want to overbrush with varnishing. So we just pour it onto the canvas and then try and push it around gently without overbrushing, because you don't want to get bubbles in the varnish. You want to really keep it a slow process where you're just spreading it rather than brushing back and forth. So we really want to spread it really nice and thin and evenly across the canvas. So if you find any puddles of the varnish, try and push them out and spread them out evenly across. I hope you can see how rich the colours become when it's varnished. It's just amazing. Every time I do it, I never get tired of seeing how beautiful the colours come out. It's like it takes a grey sheen away from the surface of the paint so that you can actually see the real colours that are underneath. Just lovely. So you're kind of flying a little bit blind sometimes when you're brushing over the top like this, but the best way to find out what's happening is to get your eye down at the level of the canvas, looking towards a window. So I'm going to spread this all around so it's nice and even, but don't let it get so thin that you have to go brush. You just want to spread it evenly and thinly across without over brushing. So after I think I've spread it out fairly evenly, then I get my eye down at the level of the canvas and I check it. One thing I'm doing right now is doing a thing called laying off, where I get the brush right across every area of the canvas, going from one side to the other in the same direction, and that gets a nice even coat. So let's have a look and see if I've missed any spots. So you go right down to the eye level, looking towards the window, and I've got a fly in there. That's hilarious. I'm going to have to get him out of there. So it looks like I've got most of the bits on the top surface there. Haven't missed anything. And the other thing you're looking for is to see if there's a puddle. You don't want any puddles. If it's getting a bit thick in some areas, then you want to just thin it out and spread it out evenly. So then the very last stage, of course, is just to get it brushed around the edges. So a good even coat around the edges with this varnish, because I've got colour on the sides and the client this time is not going to frame it, so they want to see nice bright colour around the edges of the painting. Poor little fly, he's just... looks like he's just expired. Silly sausage for landing in the varnish. So one thing I do with smaller paintings, the fumes that come off the varnish can be quite strong. And so with smaller canvases, I'll often put some sort of cover over the top. After I finish varnishing, I put a cover over the top that's not going to touch the painting and leaves enough air for it to sort of fume off and evaporate and dry, but so that if any bugs are flying over the top of the canvas, what can happen to them is they're flying through the air and all of a sudden they hit this cloud of disgusting stinky vapor and they go and then they drop into the varnish, and then the poor little things will just be swimming around in there. And so I like putting a cover over it so that that doesn't happen. You don't get any bugs in it while it's trying to dry overnight. So I think that's fairly good. So I'll just do a bit of a check around here and see if I've got everything on the edges. Sometimes it's good to do a second coat. So I check to see if we haven't missed anything on the edges. Doing the second coat, of course, will just catch anything that you might have missed the first time around. And I'll just check one more time over this side here. Looks like, hopefully I haven't missed any little pieces along that side. Looking at the reflection. So there you go. That's how you varnish an acrylic painting. That will take about, usually it's overnight to dry. And then if I feel like it needs a second coat, then I'll do a second coat. So I'll just repeat that. And then I usually leave it in the studio for 3 to 4 days, maybe, so that all the fumes go, so that when you come and pick up your painting, you don't have to have a smelly painting in your house. So there you go. So if you'd like any more information on how to paint, or tips and tricks for painting, drawing, varnishing, any sort of art tricks, then go over to zenartart.com and look in the dojo area. So zenartart.com and look in the dojo area. Hi there. I've had lots of people ask me why paintings should be varnished, because it's something that we always do, and it's a really important step in looking after a painting. So acrylic paintings and oil paintings both need to be varnished. Oil paintings need to dry for a lot longer, sometimes 3 to 6 months or longer if the paint is really thick. But acrylic paintings you can varnish a lot sooner, obviously, because acrylic paint dries so quickly. So the reason for varnishing paintings is so that the painting is protected. So when you first paint a painting and leave it to dry, the paint surface is not 100% protected against, like if you wanted to clean the painting, for example, you can go over with a damp rag, but sometimes if the paint hasn't been applied evenly with the right amount of medium, all that sort of stuff, the paint can actually lift off as you're cleaning it. And some clients like to clean vigorously around their homes with lots of nice chemicals. So it's really good to have some sort of barrier over the top of the surface of the painting so that they can really easily be cleaned, dusted. You know, if anyone has a party and throws wine on the painting, then it can be really easily cleaned. So it's really good to have this barrier protection coat over the top of the paint. And the other thing is that I always paint, my painting methods kind of, I've kind of learnt from the methods of the old masters. Like we can go into art museums and art galleries and see paintings that are hundreds of years old, because the guys that really knew what they were doing back then, you know, it's not all of them, because some paintings have kind of disintegrated over time and really need some serious restoration. But a lot of the old masters used really good techniques where they painted a painting in one chemical compound. Like let's say you're looking at oil paint. So you paint with the oil paint and the mediums that you use normally for oil painting, let it dry thoroughly. And when you do the varnish over the top, what they used to do is use a different compound for the clear varnish that is a different chemistry compound from the paint that's underneath. Now the reason that they did this was so that the varnish could then stay on the surface of the painting just as a clear protective layer, and then over the years and years of the painting being hung in the atmosphere, you know, there's like dust and grime and smoke and acid or whatever's in the atmosphere gets soaked into that clear surface of the varnish, but it doesn't actually get through to the paint. So over the years, the varnish becomes brown and yellowy, and it's absorbed all of the bad things that are floating around in the air and formed a barrier to protect the paint that's underneath it. So then what the restorers do is because the two layers of the paint underneath and the clear coat varnish over the top are two different compounds, they use a solvent that will dissolve the top clear coat but not affect the paint underneath at all. So what they would do then is they would remove carefully remove with the solvent the entire layer of varnish. Let's say it's after a couple of 100 years or something. Remove all that brown discolored varnish, and then they could actually just paint a new fresh layer of varnish over the top. So, you know, I'm hoping that my paintings might be around for a couple of 100 years. You've got to always keep hoping and dreaming, don't you? So I'm always keeping that in mind for my clients to make sure that their painting is going to have longevity. So it's kind of an archival method that I'm using that means that the painting can be around for a long time. So with acrylic paintings, I'll just switch the camera over and have a look at this one that I did yesterday. With acrylic paintings, I use a different chemical compound as well. So on the acrylic paint, that's kind of like plastic. You know, when you're painting in acrylic paint, it's kind of like painting in plastic. So this painting was done quite thick, and it needed to be dried over a long period of time, because I really gobbed on the thick paint to get this painting done in such a short amount of time. And so once it's all 100% dry, and there's a trick that I'll tell you about that as well, then the varnish can go over the top. Now, the varnish that I use on top of acrylic paints, so acrylic paints are water-based and they're kind of like plastic when they dry, but I'm using a solvent-based varnish over the top. It's a very smelly, stinky solvent-based varnish, so that means that you can't wash your brushes up in water. It's got to be washed up in terps. So having a solvent-based varnish over the top means that the art restorers, whenever it ever happens, can remove the varnish, and I've had to do it once in a while for some paintings, remove a varnish and then put a new fresh coat over the top. I can really easily remove that layer of clear varnish by using the solvents to dissolve it, and it doesn't affect the plastic layer of paint at all underneath. So the tip I was going to tell you about with acrylic paintings to make sure that they're dry is acrylic paints, usually if it's a fairly thin layer of paint, takes about 30 days to fully cure. So what that means is when you first paint with acrylic paint, the paint is quite weak. So, you know, when you first paint, let's say you drop a drop of paint onto a melamine tabletop, it's pretty easy to get it off. Even after it's dried in the first hour or so, it's pretty easy to kind of just scratch it off with your fingernail because the paint's still kind of soft and rubbery. But if you left that for, say, a month, it would go really rock hard and it would be difficult to remove. So the same thing happens on the canvas. So once you first apply the paint, you can tell that it hasn't quite fully cured. I've got a way of telling when I want to test it to see if it's fully cured, is I get my thumbnail and I go to the thickest part of the paint and I just press my thumbnail straight into the paint. If it leaves an indentation in there, I know that the paint still hasn't 100% cured to rock hard. If I can't get my thumb to actually make a mark in there, my thumbnail, then I know that it's rock hard and it has been cured. So it's after it's fully cured is when you want to do the varnish, because after it's fully cured is when all of the fuming off, the evaporation, which is what the drying process is, all the evaporation is finished, and then you can seal it over so that no air can get into it at all. So if you seal it too soon, when it's not quite dry yet, you may have some bubbling happening. So it's always extremely important to dry the layer of the paint first before finally doing the final sealing clear coat. So the other reason that I love varnishing is because it takes the grey sheen off the painting and you can see the beautiful rich colours in the paint underneath. So it really just transforms the artwork when you can look through and see the richness of the colours underneath. So that's all about why you should varnish an oil and acrylic painting. If you want any more tips, go over to the dojo at Zen and the Art of Art. Hi there. I thought I'd just have a little chat with you today about varnishing again. And people ask me whether varnishing should be done in gloss or satin or matte. And my preference is always to varnish paintings in a gloss finish. And there's a few reasons for this, but the biggest reason is that the clarity of the artwork when you look through a gloss finish is so much better. Sure, you get a few little reflections where the light hits it and shines against it, but the best thing for me is to be able to see straight through the glossy coat and see the rich colours of the painting underneath. So what I do is I often recommend this to students in the classes as well, is to do little test panels just so that you can see with your own eyes what's actually happening on the surface of the paint. And so I'll just show you that. I'll just switch the camera around and show you this little test board that I've got here. Now, I'm not sure whether I can, yeah, this is a good angle from here. So this is a little board that I've created, just one of those little cheap Montmartre canvas panels. And on the back I've written what I've used on the quadrant that's in front of it. So you can see this quadrant here. This quadrant is, I've used gloss on it. So you do get a bit of reflection on it, but look at how you can see so clearly through to the black paint underneath. So what I've done is, first of all, I've coated this whole panel with just plain black paint. This is my oil varnish test board by the looks. Winsor & Newton Artist Gloss Varnish for Oils, 1 coat. So that's this corner here. So the whole panel has been coated in black paint, and then I've gone over the top with different panels of varnish. Now, can you see how black it looks under that panel of gloss? The color is so rich. It's just fantastic. So imagine if you had a whole pile of other different colors. This painting behind has been done in acrylic, and this one's been varnished in gloss as well, but the colors just come out so richly when you use gloss. So the other panels on here, I've used satin and matte. Now the matte one is the top left corner, Winsor & Newton Matte Varnish for Oil Colour. So that top panel there has been done in matte. And look at the grey sheen that's across the top. You can't actually see the colour that's underneath because of the grey sheen that's sitting on the top of the surface of the painting. And then the similar thing happens down below here with the satin. Pretty sure that's a satin coating. That you get that sort of sheen on the top where you can't actually see the proper colour underneath. But when you look at the gloss one, you can see straight through to the colour underneath. So some clients prefer, they actually request us to do it in matte or satin, but I always recommend against it. Of course, I'll always do exactly what you want on the surface of your painting, but we always recommend the gloss surface because you can see right through to the deep, rich colour underneath. Hi there, we've been talking about varnishing, and yesterday I talked about why I like using gloss varnish rather than satin or invisible, which is also known as matte varnish. And I came across a bottle that was sitting on the shelf, and I just want to give you this other reason why I don't like using satin or matte as much as I like using gloss. So I've got this bottle that's been sitting around for a while. So this one is invisible. This is the matte varnish. Now it's been sitting very still on the shelf, and I don't know if you can see that sludge that's around the bottom of the bottle there. The sort of layer of sludge that's sitting on the bottom. Everything else is clear in the bottle except for this layer of sludge at the bottom. So that explains how they actually make satin and matte varnish, and this is true in all cases. They take a full gloss varnish, and then they get these teeny weeny little particles, and millions of them, and throw them into the gloss varnish mixture. And what happens is those little particles are designed to, once they're painted on the surface of the painting, they're designed to cause little bumps and disperse the light. So it's like when you have a fluoro light and you have one of those covers over the top, it's called a diffuser. It sort of sprays the light out a bit. So what's happening is when you varnish a painting with satin or matte is that you're painting gloss on there, but you may as well have taken a whole pile of really fine sand and then thrown it across the surface of the painting, because those little tiny particles that they put into it to take the gloss off are actually little particles that disperse the light and bounce the light around. So what ends up happening is you can't see through that layer of gloss as clearly because of all the little particles being in the way. So here's another bottle. This is the satin medium and varnish. This is an old version of it. They've got new labeling now, but this has been sitting on the shelf for a while too. Can you see how the top part of this bottle is clear and the bottom part is full of this murky liquid? It looks liquid to us, but there's heaps and heaps of little tiny particles in there that they put in that get spread. Once you shake this bottle up and then paint it on, it gets spread all over the surface of the painting, and so the little particles will stop you from being able to see the clarity of the painting underneath. So this is the board that I was showing you that's got the gloss, and so the gloss is on that top, well, it's on this corner here. There's the gloss. There's a fair bit of shine, true, but once you are looking at the painting, you can see right through to the rich colour underneath. And this one here is the matte. So yes, there's no shine on it, but look at how grey it is compared to the gloss area. You really can't see clearly. Imagine if there was a painting underneath there, you wouldn't be able to see it as clearly as you do when you're looking through a gloss surface. So that shows really clearly. All the millions of little particles that are in here are preventing you from seeing clearly through to the painting underneath. So that's the second reason why I use gloss rather than invisible or matte varnish or satin varnish. So if you want any more tips and tricks, go and visit the Zen and the Art of Art website, which is zenartart.com. And if you go to the dojo area, that's where all the cool info is. Thanks for watching.